So for this video, we're going to go over the library panel. And the library panel is a resource manager for all your different nodes that you have inside of Designer. Each node or nodes live in this category list dependent on what they do. So we have function nodes, generators, filters, material filters, mesh adaptive functions, 3D view, PBR materials, MDL resources, MDL. Now we're not going to go over each different category, but I'll kind of go over what I tend to use most of the time. Starting from the top, let's look at the favorites panel. By default, when you first launch Substance Designer, there's nothing in this window because to add something to your favorites panel, you have to actually click on a node and assign it as a favorite. So this is really helpful when I tend to find myself using the same nodes over and over again. So if we actually go into one of these categories, so we can go into noises or patterns, we can find the node we want and we can right click and add to favorites. And from now on, when you go back into favorites, you'll actually be able to see that node that you added to favorites. If you wanted to get rid of it, you can right click again and just click remove from favorites. And now it is gone from your favorites panel. Graph items are the same things we've talked about before in the graph view video of the tutorial. It's all the things to keep your graph nice and organized. So if we didn't want to use one of the other methods of either pressing spacebar or the right click menu, we can drag and drop any of these nodes into the graph view and change the description. We can change the title in the frame. We could change the description in the frame. One thing to note about the frame is to have the same effect like we did before on creating a frame. So for example, if we select multiple nodes and we right click and add frame, it encompasses all the nodes that we have selected. So to get that same effect, if we can just delete this old frame, you'll notice that if we drag the frame over like any kind of node, it's gonna keep it at this fixed size. So to have that same effect, we can just, before we drag in the frame, let's just select a couple nodes and then drag the frame over anywhere next to them. And you'll notice that then it encompasses all of them as well. From here, we have the atomic nodes, and the atomic nodes is the same thing we talked about right from the beginning of the tutorial. It's a certain way to get all these nodes that you get from the space bar, that you get from the right click, or even up here in the graph view. It's all the same nodes and it has all the same icons. So we have the blends as we do here, we have bitmaps and so forth. If you're into creating your own effects map nodes or creating your own generators, you might want to look into the function nodes category. These are very math heavy nodes that can help you with creating those types of singular nodes that can help you inside of Substance Designer. But from here, we'll just skip over and go into the generators panel. The generators panel is broken up into two different categories. We have the noises and the patterns. The noises I would describe as something that's a little bit more organic and more random in nature. So a bunch of noises, a bunch of black and white spots, just things that can really give your texture an almost organic feel. They're really great for creating masks. And the second one is the patterns, and patterns is something that's kind of more man-made. So we'll have brick patterns, we'll have different shapes, different meshes, and this is really cool when you're trying to create brick walls or certain patterns that the organic noises couldn't help you create. Filters category holds all the nodes that have the same effects as something that you would find in Photoshop. So it's broken up into a few different categories. We have adjustments, blurs, we have effects. So inside of the adjustments are the pretty standard ones that you would find in Photoshop. So we have levels, histogram scans, and these can actually just be brought in and connected into any single grayscale node. And from here, you have a bunch of view attributes and well, actually this one isn't auto level, so it kind of auto levels does that, but we can do, if we wanted to invert this image, we could do a grayscale input and then this instantly inverts the node. But there's also luminous high pass, we have different kind of quantized grayscale nodes, so a bunch of different settings to mess with your grayscale nodes and color nodes as well. The blending category holds all the blend modes that you wouldn't typically find inside of the blend node by default. So when you bring in a blend node, you'll notice that inside the properties, we have a few different blend modes to choose from. But the ones that you'll find in the library are the ones that aren't in the dropdown. So this is color burn, color dodge. These can give you your nodes some really cool effects when creating color maps. Blurs, again, are just something that you'd find in Photoshop. There's different kinds of blurs, so you can mess with each one and see the kind of effect they do. The channels nodes, we talked about a little bit in the 2D view when we're trying to isolate the different channels, but this is a good way to, if you wanted to split up a color map into different channels, or if you wanted to pack multiple grayscale channels into one single RGB, these are the nodes that'll help you with that. Effects can warp your image and distort it with certain effects. So we can swirl it, we can do some crazy vector morphs, some vector warps, and so on. Normal maps are all about normal maps. We can combine different normal maps, we can normalize, we can change the intensity of it, we can change a height to a normal, and so forth. The tiling, this is really great if, say, you broke the tiling of something. So, for example, let's just do a noise. Let's just do a noise. Let's do black and white spots. Let's do a transform. And let's bring this noise upscale. So if we do the hotkey spacebar inside the 2D view like we described in the previous video, you'll notice that we have this gigantic seam now. Now to fix this, we look into the tiling category inside of the library. Here we can choose a few different options. We can make it tile patch grayscale or make it photo grayscale. Make it tile photo grayscale. I like using the make it tile photo grayscale. So we'll bring this in. We can plug it in. And from here, we have a few different options to kind of get rid of the seams that we have in our image. And already just with that, you can see that we've gotten rid of the original seam that we had from here. So this is super useful when you accidentally broke your tiling of your texture and you want to get that back. On the topic of transforms, the transform category holds all the different transforms and image manipulations that we can do to the actual node. So we can do skews, we can do quad transfers, we could do mirror grayscales, and this all corresponds to the same way you would transform a node. So if we bring in a quad transform grayscale, you can kind of see the effect it does. So just different ways to manipulate your image inside of the 2D view and give you different effects and kind of more control over the way your 2D image is shaped. Material filters is essentially the same thing you would find under filters, but instead of single node filters, these correspond to a full-on material. We talked about how we can bring in full materials from the Explorer view. Say we had a whole node graph and we kind of brought that whole node graph into another material as a single node. We can actually plug them in to these different filters and we'll get different effects. So you can kind of go over these and see what each one of them does. Mesh Adaptive is essentially what you would find inside of Substance Painter. They are kind of like smart masks and they do different weathering effects based on the bakes that you have connected. So they're really dependent on your normal map bakes, your cavity bakes, your world space normals. So it's all these kind of different edge wears and dripping rust and all these different kind of effects that you'd find inside of Substance Painter. We have the same ability inside of Designer. Close that. Functions, kind of the same thing we talked about up here from the function nodes. They're a way to create singular atomic nodes and they're super math heavy. So if you want to play with those. 3D view, we talked about this a little bit in the last video. These hold all the HDRIs that you can drag into the 3D view and change the lighting. PBR materials are just a set of materials that are included with Substance Designer, and these are also really good resources to learn how certain materials are made. So if we want to bring in this gravel, for example, into our graph, we can actually right-click on this single node and open reference. Do you want to load package? You say open. And what this does, this loads the gravel package and we can actually see how this gravel was created. So this is really useful if you're trying to learn how to make certain materials and how they did it. I would highly suggest checking out a few of these. Not only can we actually open the resources for these, we can actually go back into the noises and let's just go back into our original graph. We can drag, let's say, a black and white spots. We can do the exact same thing. We can right click and open the reference, and we can see how these noise maps are made. And as you can see, these are created using an effects map. So it's all this different kind of math that goes into creating these. So if you want to edit the effects map, you can do that and kind of look at how this thing is created. Some other things that we could do with the library, we can actually, as I talked about it before, we can dock this window over pre-existing windows or just move it wherever we like. Me personally, I love having almost a full screen effect on the library. So if I just undock this and hover over the Explorer view, we actually now have a tabbed view. So this is really useful if we want to give a little bit more resource space to being able to see all the different nodes that we have in the library. Another thing we can do is if you, my window's kind of small, but if we were to just extend this a little bit, we actually have this toggle that can show the icons on or off, or sorry, that can show the names of the icons. So if you rather not see the names, you have the ability to do that. The one to the left of it, we can change the size of the icon. So if we want to do large, we can do just a list if we want to. We have the ability to change that as well. We've gone over the search functionality before. So if you want to look for something in particular, we can just type in black and white, and it gives us a list dependent on which category we are in at the time. So if we're in patterns and we just type in brick, it'll give us all the different results for this search query. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about in the library panel is how to create your own filters. We can do that by going up here to the very top and just adding a folder. From here, we can name this folder whatever we like. So we can do custom. And once we've done that, we can right click and add a filter. From here, you'll notice this window pop down here at the bottom, and this essentially is telling this filter what to look for. So by default, these are the basic settings that it sets for you when you first create a filter. So it's actually looking in the all drop down. So we can actually, if we don't want to look in the whole library, we can kind of choose by bitmaps, favorites, fonts, functions, and etc. I like keeping it at all because I like that this filter searches through the entire library. We can change the other kind of settings. So we can search by base name, URL, category, and tags. So, and then the final thing is what it's actually searching for. So if it contains, like, say I type in brick, it's going to look for anything that contains the name brick. So let's actually do that right now. We'll just type in brick. And right off the bat, it brings all the nodes that have the brick name corresponding to it. We can easily change this to anything we want. If we wanted to do a mesh, again, it brings up any nodes that have the mesh name in it. So we can easily just close this, and we can rename this filter to anything we want as well. So we can just name it mesh. And this is a really cool way to, if you want to have specific nodes showing up with your custom filters that you're constantly using, this is one way to be able to do that. And that pretty much covers everything inside of Substance Designer. I hope you guys really enjoyed this tutorial. If you have a question, drop me a line and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.